In today's episode of Today in World War II, April 28th, the German ambassador tries to convince Hitler that it's not worth invading the Soviet Union. A heroic Kiwi in Greece wins the Victoria Cross. Churchill makes another blunder without any advice from his cabinet, by the way. Speaking of blunders, only at the end of April does the East Coast, not even only a 15-mile East Coast section goes into full blackout. Uh, a American submarine gets a really big score. And finally, as mentioned yesterday, a devastating E-boat attack takes place against Americans who were getting ready to invade Normandy. Let's get started. All right, so on April 28th, 1941, in Berlin, the German ambassador to the Soviet Union, Friedrich Werner von der Schulenburg, attempted to convince Hitler that the Soviet Union was generally pretty friendly towards Germany, and the two nations could achieve greater friendship by working closer together. I'm going to throw my 2 cents into this, and I tell you that the German ambassador was correct. The Soviets, Stalin did not want at this point in time to be in a war with Germany. Now, I think that both sides felt, Stalin and Hitler, that war between the two was inevitable because of their ideologies. Fascism and communism doesn't work. It's like oil and water. Yes, they're authoritarians. Yes, they believe in wide scale murder of their own citizens. Yes, they have territorial demands. Yes, they believe that each of their philosophical ideals are inevitable and should be spread across the entire world, blah, 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 right? But right now, the Soviets would have been just fine to let things stand. Remember, they signed a very favorable economic treaty with Germany, and they were supplying them with food and munitions and all this stuff. So, I mean, it was working out for both sides. But Hitler obviously believed that the Bolsheviks were the real enemy. He'd always been against the Bolsheviks, against communists, and he had the erroneous impression that he just had to kick the door in and the whole rotten building would collapse, which, of course, as we're going to see, did not happen. On April 28th, 1941, a very courageous New Zealander, a Kiwi sergeant. His name was Jack Hinton. He was with the 7th Division, and he was fighting in Greece. Remember, Greece is falling now, and they're just trying to evacuate. Well, he cleared out 3 machine gun nests and a mortar with grenades and captured a 6-inch gun. This was all taking place on a dock. Okay, not much cover on a dock. But that's what he did. And he was shot in the stomach. He was taken prisoner. And later on, he was awarded the Victoria Cross. What bravery. I'm going to repeat what I said right now. I love Aussies. They're awesome people. I really love Kiwis. When I was in Moscow at the embassy, I love Kiwis. They were the best. Anyway, April 28th, 1941, Churchill, and I'm going to add this little adjunct here, without referring or getting advice from his chiefs of staff, unilaterally decides that he's going to write a directive stating that there is absolutely no need at the present time to make provisions for the defense of Malaya and Singapore. I mean, obviously, hindsight is 2020. You look back on this and you say that what an asinine statement. I can look at Churchill's previous blunders and say, you know what, that's kind of par for the course. He had a less than even success rate on a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously, I love Churchill. I think he's amazing in what he did. But he did have these moments, right? But on the other hand, if I'm prepared to give Churchill the benefit of the doubt, I will just give this one statistic. 80,000 Allied soldiers surrendered to the Japanese at Singapore. The Japanese only had about 30, a little over 30,000 soldiers. So you would think that by normal calculations, if a defender with can hold off an attacker if the attacker has less than a 3-to-1 advantage, typically speaking. The Japanese turned that upside down, but it was perhaps the right thing would have been maybe we should work on covering the moat from a land invasion, not assuming it's going to be a sea invasion. But anyway, obviously, right now, 2025, it's an asinine statement that by Churchill. Speaking of asinine decisions, on April 28th, 1942, a 15-mile strip of the Atlantic coast around New York finally begins conducting nightly blackouts to interfere with the German U-boats who were absolutely making hay on a convoy. Well, I guess now they started to do convoys, but before, shipping going up from the Gulf along the Atlantic coast before it goes up and makes the turn towards the UK, the Northern Atlantic. Um, so the war started with the Germans on December 11th. So January, February, March, April, over 4 months where the U.S. is in the war, and only now they started instituting blackout. Only now it's only a 15-mile strip of the Atlantic coast. I have no words to describe the arrogance and the stupidity of the American command, in this part of the war. And it was a very important part of the war at the time. So don't think that I pick on you guys who are not Americans. I pick on us just as much because we did some stupid stuff as well. On April 28th, 1943, the American submarine Gudgeon spotted a 17.5-ton German troop carrier. It's called the Kamakura Maru. And for some unknown reason, it was sailing unescorted in the Philippine Islands. The sub fired a spread of 4 torpedoes, and it looks like it got 2 hits on the starboard side. There was vehicles in the hold, fuel. It started to spread. The fire started spread. It was rapid. And anyway, there was explosion. The whole thing went up. And it turned out that the Japanese failed to send out a distress signal before the ship sank. This No one even knew about its loss until May 3rd, 1945. Think about that. This happened in April of 1944. Over a year later, they just figured out that the ship was sunk. I mean, they lost over 2,000 Japanese soldiers in that sinking, which meant they had more. They probably had 5,000 troops, if not more, and they didn't know where they went. I mean, it just it boggles my mind. Boy, I tell you, I feel like I'm just chronicling just utter stupidity that happens in wartime, but all sides, I suppose. But yeah, that was a big deal. And then another big deal, finally, on April 28th, 1944, as I kind of alluded to in yesterday's video, a small group of German E-boats came across the American landing exercise at Slapton in England and Devonshire. Again, we are training our troops to how to disembark from their LSDs into the Higgins landing craft to assault Normandy. In this case, these troops, like I said yesterday, were going to be landing on Utah Beach, and so the E-boat attacked. There was no escort, and they sank 2 LSDs. They killed 198 sailors and 541 soldiers. So preparing for D-Day on Utah Beach, we lost almost 1,000 soldiers. They covered it up. No one, this was heavy censorship was put on this because obviously one day had D-Day security, but it's what an ignominious end for those poor soldiers and sailors who died during exercises before the actual invasion. Well, that's it for today. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention and your support as usual. I'll see you tomorrow.